I spent 3 hours one Saturday planning the perfect picnic. I'm talking spreadsheets here. Weather apps checked on multiple devices, backup locations researched, menu planned down to the minute for optimal freshness, playlist curated to match the sunset timing, blanket position calculated for the best view with minimal sun glare. I had contingency plans for my contingency plans. I'd thought of everything. And then, 20 minutes after we arrived at this beautiful spot by the lake, a freak windstorm rolled in from absolutely nowhere, the kind that wasn't on any forecast, couldn't have been predicted, and turned my perfect afternoon into a mad scramble to grab flying napkins and protect the food while getting pelted with debris. We ended up eating soggy sandwiches in my car, laughing hysterically at the absurdity of it all. And sitting there, wiping rain off my face, I had this crystallizing thought. I'd spent 3 hours trying to control an afternoon, and nature had casually reminded me in 3 minutes that control was never mine to have. That's the thing about modern life that nobody really wants to talk about. We've built this entire civilization on the premise that we can control things, that if we just plan enough, work hard enough, optimize enough, we can bend reality to our will. And modern technology has made this illusion more seductive than ever before. We can control the temperature of our homes to the exact degree. We can order food from across the world and have it arrive in minutes. We can curate our social media feeds to show us only what we want to see. We can track our steps, our sleep, our calories, our productivity, our everything. We have apps for managing every aspect of our lives, algorithms that predict what we want before we know we want it, systems that promise to automate away all uncertainty. We're living in the age of maximum control, or at least maximum perceived control. And I think it's making us absolutely miserable. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of the control we think we have is an illusion. Not all of it, but far more than we want to admit. And the gap between how much control we think we have and how much we actually have, that gap is where a tremendous amount of modern anxiety lives. Let me paint you a picture of what I mean. You wake up in the morning and check your phone. Already you're making dozens of tiny decisions. Which notifications to read, which to ignore, which apps to open, what to respond to. You feel in control, right? You're choosing what to engage with. Except the apps were designed by teams of psychologists and engineers whose entire job is to manipulate your behavior, to keep you scrolling, clicking, engaging. The algorithm is deciding what you see and in what order based on calculations about what will keep you hooked. You think you're steering the ship, but really you're being steered, and the illusion that you're in control makes you more vulnerable, not less. Or think about your career. You went to school, got a degree, built skills, made strategic choices about where to work and what to pursue. You feel like you're in the driver's seat of your professional life. But then the economy shifts, your industry gets disrupted by technology, your company gets acquired, your boss leaves and gets replaced by someone who doesn't value your work, a pandemic shuts down entire sectors overnight. All these massive forces completely beyond your control, and suddenly that career trajectory you'd carefully mapped out is worthless. You can influence your career, absolutely, your choices matter. But control it? That's a different story. I have a friend who's a doctor, and she once told me something that stuck with me. She said the hardest part of her job isn't dealing with illness, it's dealing with patients and families who are desperate for certainty, for control, in situations where neither exists. They want guarantees about treatment outcomes, precise timelines for recovery, promises that if they just do everything right, everything will be okay. And she has to gently, repeatedly, remind them that medicine isn't an exact science, that bodies are complex systems that don't always respond predictably, that some things just can't be controlled no matter how badly we want to control them. She sees people tear themselves apart trying to exert control over their health in ways that are ultimately counterproductive, obsessively researching, second-guessing every medical decision, driving themselves to exhaustion trying to optimize every variable. And often, the people who do best are the ones who can accept uncertainty, who can do what they can do and then surrender to the process. But our culture doesn't reward surrender. It rewards control, or at least the performance of control. We're supposed to have our lives together, to be crushing our goals, to have plans and strategies and personal brands. Look at social media, everyone's life looks so curated, so intentional, so controlled. Perfect vacations, perfect relationships, perfect career moves, perfect homes. And even though we rationally know it's all edited and filtered and staged, we still internalize this message that we should be able to control our lives to that degree. That if our lives feel messy or uncertain or out of control, we're doing something wrong. The irony is that the more options we have, the more we feel like we should be in control, but also the less in control we actually feel. Think about trying to choose a movie to watch on a streaming service. You have thousands of options, unlimited choice, total control over your entertainment. And yet you spend 45 minutes scrolling, paralyzed by options, second-guessing every choice, wondering if there's something better you're missing. You had more genuine satisfaction when you had 3 channels and you just watched whatever was on. The abundance of choice creates this burden of optimization. If you can control everything, then you're responsible for controlling everything perfectly, and the anxiety of that responsibility is crushing. Let me tell you about something else I've noticed. We've created all these systems to give us control over our time. Calendars, productivity apps, time-blocking techniques, morning routines, life hacks. We schedule every minute, optimize every hour, track every task. And somehow we're more stressed about time than ever before. Because when you treat time like something you can fully control, every interruption feels like a failure, every unexpected event feels like a violation, every moment not spent productively feels like waste. You're fighting a losing battle against the fundamental reality that time flows regardless of your plans, that life is inherently unpredictable, that control over your schedule is always going to be partial at best. I think about parenting too, because nowhere is the illusion of control more dangerous than when it comes to raising kids. Modern parents are sold this idea that if they just do everything right, read all the right books, use the right techniques, provide the right opportunities, they can control who their kids become. They can engineer successful, happy, well-adjusted humans. And the amount of anxiety this creates is staggering. Parents micromanaging every aspect of their children's lives, hovering over every homework assignment, orchestrating every playdate, tracking every milestone against developmental charts. Terrified that one wrong move, one missed opportunity, one moment of not being in control will ruin their child's future. But here's what that misses. Kids are not projects to be managed, they're human beings with their own personalities, their own struggles, their own paths. You can influence them, guide them, support them, love them. But control them. Control who they become. That's an illusion that hurts both the parent and the child. The parent lives in constant anxiety about maintaining control they never actually had. The child either rebels against the control or becomes anxious themselves, learning that life is something to be micromanaged rather than experienced. And let's talk about relationships, because oh man, the illusion of control in romantic relationships is a special kind of heartbreak. People enter relationships thinking that if they just communicate right, choose the right partner, work hard enough, they can control the outcome. They can ensure the relationship succeeds, that the love lasts, that they don't get hurt. They read relationship books, follow relationship experts, analyze every interaction, trying to master the formula for lasting love. But relationships are two complex human beings, each with their own growth and changes and free will, trying to build something together. You cannot control another person. You cannot control their feelings, their choices, whether they stay or go, whether they hurt you or heal you. You can only control yourself, your own behavior, your own choices about how to show up. And accepting that lack of control, that fundamental vulnerability, is terrifying but also necessary for any real intimacy. Here's what's particularly insidious about the illusion of control. It makes us blame ourselves for things that aren't our fault. When something goes wrong, when life doesn't go according to plan, we immediately ask ourselves what we did wrong, how we could have prevented it, what we should have controlled better. And sometimes that's useful, sometimes there are genuine lessons to learn. But often we're just torturing ourselves for failing to control things that were never controllable in the first place. You didn't get the job. You must not have prepared enough, optimized your resume enough, networked enough. Your relationship ended. You must not have communicated enough, tried enough, been enough. You got sick. You must not have eaten right, exercised enough, managed stress properly. We take responsibility for outcomes that are influenced by countless variables beyond our control, and we drive ourselves crazy trying to figure out the magic formula that would have given us a different result. I watched my sister go through this when she was trying to get pregnant. She did everything right. Tracked her cycle with military precision, took all the supplements, ate the perfect diet, eliminated stress, timed everything perfectly. And month after month, nothing. She became obsessed with control, convinced that if she just optimized enough variables, she could make it happen. And the more she tried to control it, the more out of control she felt, the more devastated she became with each failure. It wasn't until she finally, exhausted and heartbroken, let go of trying to control it, accepted that maybe it would happen and maybe it wouldn't, that she could breathe again. Ironically, that's when she got pregnant. But that's not really the point. The point is that her suffering came not from the situation itself, but from the illusion that she should be able to control it. Let's look at money and the illusion of control, because this is everywhere in modern life. We're told that if we just budget right, invest wisely, work hard, make smart choices, we can control our financial future. And again, there's some truth there, your choices matter, financial literacy matters. But it's only part of the story. Markets crash, industries disappear, medical emergencies happen, recessions hit, housing costs skyrocket, student debt crushes people. The economic forces shaping our lives are massive and largely beyond individual control. But instead of acknowledging that, we shame people for not controlling what they can't control. We tell them they should have saved more, invested smarter, chosen a more lucrative career, been more financially disciplined. As if individual discipline can protect you from systemic economic realities. And here's something fascinating about the illusion of control. It's not distributed evenly. People with more actual power, more resources, more privilege, they often have a stronger belief that they're in control of their lives because, well, they have more control. Things do tend to work out for them more often. So they assume it's because of their choices, their hard work, their smart decisions. They genuinely believe they're the architects of their success. Meanwhile, people with less power, who face more obstacles and systemic barriers, they actually have a clearer view of how little control they have because they're constantly bumping up against forces they can't overcome no matter how hard they try. The person born wealthy who stays wealthy thinks they earned it through control and good choices. The person born poor who stays poor despite working 3 jobs knows exactly how little control matters sometimes. Technology is maybe the biggest source of this illusion. We walk around with supercomputers in our pockets that can access almost all human knowledge, connect us to anyone anywhere, accomplish tasks that would have been impossible a generation ago. We can track our location, our health metrics, our productivity, our social connections. We can automate our homes, our finances, our shopping. We feel like we're living in the future, like we're masters of our domain. But ask yourself, do you actually understand how any of it works? Could you fix your phone if it broke? Do you know what the algorithms are doing with your data? Do you have any control over the software updates that change your devices whether you want them to or not? We're completely dependent on systems we don't understand, controlled by, made by companies whose priorities may or may not align with ours. We have the illusion of control, the convenience of control, without any actual power over the infrastructure our lives depend on. And social media, social media is the illusion of control on steroids. You can craft your image, control your narrative, choose what to share and what to hide, curate your personal brand. You feel like you're in charge of how people see you. Except you have zero control over how people actually interpret what you share, how the algorithm decides who sees it, what gets screenshot and shared out of context, how your digital presence affects real-world opportunities. You're performing control while actually being subject to forces, social dynamics, platform policies, mob mentalities, that are completely beyond your influence. Let me tell you what I think is really going on here. The illusion of control is a coping mechanism. Life is uncertain, scary, unpredictable. Bad things happen to good people for no reason. Chaos is built into the fabric of reality. That's terrifying to accept. So we create narratives of control. We tell ourselves that if we just do things right, we can protect ourselves, ensure good outcomes, prevent disaster. It's a psychological defense against the fundamental uncertainty of existence. And I get it, I really do. It's comforting to believe that we're the captains of our ships, that our choices determine our fate, that the universe operates on some fair system of cause and effect that we can learn to navigate. But the cost of this illusion is high. When we believe we have more control than we do, we set ourselves up for constant disappointment and self-blame. We exhaust ourselves trying to manage variables we can't manage. We miss opportunities to actually influence things because we're focused on controlling things that can't be controlled. We create anxiety about maintaining control that wouldn't exist if we accepted our actual level of influence. And perhaps most damaging, we become less resilient, because we never practice dealing with things going wrong, with losing control, with adapting to circumstances we didn't choose. Here's what I've learned, slowly and painfully, about control. There's a difference between control and influence. Control means you can determine the outcome, that your actions directly cause specific results. Influence means your actions can shift probabilities, can make certain outcomes more or less likely, but can't guarantee anything. And most of life is about influence, not control. You can influence your health by exercising and eating well, but you can't control whether you get sick. You can influence your career by building skills and working hard, but you can't control hiring decisions or market conditions. You can influence your relationships by showing up with kindness and honesty, but you can't control another person's feelings or choices. Once you understand that distinction, everything shifts. You stop wasting energy trying to control things that can only be influenced. You make your best effort and then you let go, because that's all you can do. You plan for the future while accepting that your plans might fall apart. You take reasonable precautions without descending into paranoid micromanagement. You do what you can do, and then you practice being okay with uncertainty about the rest. And you know what's wild? When you let go of the illusion of control, when you stop exhausting yourself trying to manage everything, you often end up with more actual influence. Because you're not scattered across a million anxieties about things you can't control, you can focus your energy on the things you genuinely can affect. You make better decisions because you're not paralyzed by the pressure of having to make perfect decisions. You build better relationships because you're not trying to control other people. You handle setbacks better because you expected that things wouldn't always go according to plan. There's this concept in psychology called the locus of control. Internal locus of control means you believe outcomes are primarily determined by your own actions. External locus of control means you believe outcomes are primarily determined by outside forces, luck, other people, circumstances. And conventional wisdom says internal locus of control is better, that it leads to more success and happiness. And to some extent that's true. Believing your actions matter, that you have agency, is important. But I think the healthiest place is actually somewhere in the middle, with a realistic assessment of what you can and can't control. Believing you control everything sets you up for constant disappointment and self-blame. Believing you control nothing leads to helplessness and passivity. The sweet spot is recognizing you have influence, that your choices matter, while accepting that outcomes depend on many factors beyond your control. Let me bring this to the realm of emotions, because this is where the illusion of control gets really tricky. We think we should be able to control how we feel. If we're sad, we should be able to think our way out of it. If we're anxious, we should be able to calm ourselves down. If we're angry, we should be able to let it go. And entire industries exist to sell us this idea: therapy techniques, self-help books, meditation apps, all promising that if you just use the right tools, you can control your emotional state. And again, there's some truth there. You can influence your emotions, you can develop coping strategies, you can change thought patterns. But control them? Emotions arise from complex neurological and hormonal processes that aren't under conscious control. You can't just decide not to be sad any more than you can decide not to be hungry. You can influence what you do in response to the emotion, but the emotion itself isn't something you can control through willpower. And when we believe we should be able to control our emotions, we add a layer of suffering on top of the original pain. We feel sad, and then we feel bad about feeling sad, angry at ourselves for not being able to just snap out of it. We feel anxious, and then we get anxious about being anxious, creating these spirals of self-judgment. Accepting that emotions aren't fully controllable, that sometimes you're just going to feel bad and that's okay, that feelings pass whether you control them or not, that's actually more helpful than trying to force yourself to feel differently. Here's another place where the illusion of control causes harm. We judge other people for outcomes they couldn't control. Someone's struggling financially, they should have made better choices. Someone's relationship failed, they should have tried harder. Someone's kid is struggling, they should have parented better. We assume that bad outcomes mean someone failed to control what they should have controlled, because accepting that sometimes bad things just happen, that you can do everything right and still end up in a bad situation, that's too scary. It undermines our belief that we can control our own fates. So we blame people for lacking control they never had, and we maintain our own illusion of safety. But probably the most profound impact of the illusion of control is how it affects our relationship with the present moment. When you believe you should be controlling everything, you're constantly living in the future, planning, strategizing, trying to prevent problems and engineer outcomes. You're never actually here, now, experiencing what is. You're always trying to manipulate what will be. And you miss your actual life, which is only ever happening right now. The present moment is the one thing you do have some degree of control over, not what happens to you, but how you show up for it, how you experience it, what you choose to notice and appreciate. But we sacrifice presence for the illusion of controlling the future. I think about my grandmother, who lived through things that would break most people. War, displacement, poverty, loss. Things she had absolutely no control over. And yet she was one of the most joyful people I've ever known. And I asked her once how she stayed so positive through so much hardship. She said something I didn't fully understand at the time. She said, "I only worry about what's in my hands. Everything else is God's business, or fate's business, or the universe's business, however you want to frame it." She had this clarity about the boundaries of her control. She did what she could do, she took care of what was hers to take care of, and then she let go. She didn't waste energy trying to control the uncontrollable. She didn't blame herself for outcomes beyond her influence. She just kept showing up for what was actually within her power, which was how she responded to circumstances, how she treated people, how she found meaning and joy in small moments. That's what I'm working toward, that clarity about what's actually mine to control. My effort, yes. My attitude, to some extent. My choices about how to spend my time and energy. My words and actions. My response to what happens. But not the weather, not other people's choices, not market forces, not accidents, not illness, not the past, not most of the future. Not the algorithm, not the economy, not genetics, not random chance. There's so much that's not mine to control, and beating myself up for failing to control it is just adding optional suffering to the mandatory suffering that's part of being human. And here's the thing that might sound paradoxical. Letting go of the illusion of control doesn't mean becoming passive or fatalistic. It doesn't mean not planning or not trying or not working toward goals. It means being honest about what you're actually doing. You're not controlling outcomes, you're influencing probabilities. You're not guaranteeing success, you're increasing your chances. You're not preventing all bad things from happening, you're building resilience for when they do. You're doing what you can do, and then you're practicing acceptance of what you can't do. And there's tremendous freedom in that honesty, freedom from the constant anxiety of maintaining an illusion, freedom to actually engage with reality as it is rather than as you wish it were. So where does that leave us, here in modern life with all its technologies and options and promises of control? I think it leaves us with a choice. We can keep buying into the illusion, keep exhausting ourselves trying to control everything, keep blaming ourselves when things don't go according to plan, keep living in constant anxiety about maintaining control we never really had. Or we can get honest. We can acknowledge that life is uncertain, that control is mostly an illusion, that the best we can do is influence things in positive directions while accepting that outcomes are never guaranteed. We can do our best and then practice letting go. We can make peace with not knowing, with not controlling, with not being able to guarantee our safety or success or happiness through perfect planning and optimization. And maybe, just maybe, when we stop clinging so desperately to the illusion of control, we'll find something better. Presence, resilience, acceptance, peace. The ability to actually enjoy our lives instead of constantly trying to manage them. The freedom to take risks without the crushing pressure of having to control outcomes. The grace to deal with setbacks without drowning in self-blame. The wisdom to know the difference between what we can influence and what we need to surrender to. That's not giving up, that's growing up. It's seeing reality clearly instead of through the comforting but ultimately destructive lens of the illusion of control. Because at the end of the day, you know what you actually control. This moment, right now. How you're showing up for it. How you're treating yourself and others. What you're choosing to notice, to appreciate, to do. That's it. That's the extent of your kingdom. And it turns out, that might just be enough.